Hi everybody, it's John Wheatcroft here again. Another Sunday Q&A. We're up to week 22. It's going to be a short one today, but I'm at pains to keep these things coming. So even if I've got very little time, I'm going to make certain that I do something so that I can get a session up every week. So I hope you'll allow me to make this one brief today, but hopefully to the point, and I hope you still get something really great from it. If you're interested, I've just got two deadlines for Guitar Techniques magazine that I've got to complete straight after this. And sometimes it's funny, you think I've got lots of work to do, and kind of, what human nature is, we can be a bit feel pressure and stress, and I think, well, work for me is going into my home studio and recording B.B. King solos, or trying to do stuff that sounds like Albert King. That's what I'm doing today. So it's hardly going down the pit, is it? It's not. It's like I work in a coal mine or something, or I'm doing something where I'm putting my life at risk or whatever. So yeah, work. Yeah, what a pressured life I lead. Talking about how you play over a 12-bar blues or whatever. But it's loads of fun. They're tons of fun to do. I really enjoy putting them together, particularly these kind of things that I'm doing now, which are less like sound-alike things and more to do with like the approach that you might take when playing over, in this case, how to play more expressively over blues is one, and then the second one is finding threads of cohesion, if you like, between the way that various jazz improvisers might phrase and the way that various blues improvisers might phrase. So I'm going over the topic of false fingerings, which comes from saxophone, the idea of playing the same note in different locations on the guitar to get different rhythmic effects and so on. So that's what I'm doing after this. But at the moment, the thing we're concerned with here is our Sunday Q&A. So we've got one kind of quite big topic I want to look at is the use of symmetrical scales and connection of symmetrical scales to things like melodic minor, and how you can kind of work into them by just changing one note, sort of scale morphing, for want of a better word, you might call this. And then also how that might connect when you go to play through the 1 to the 4 and the 5, just by moving these symmetrical ideas up or down. And there's some really useful connections that you can see there. So I hope you enjoy that. I'm going to give you 2 more Django licks as well. So I know there's 4 left, so just for the sake of brevity, I'm going to give you licks number 7 and lick number 8. Next week we'll do 9 and 10. Before all of that though, I'm going to play a piece for you. I'm going to, as I've done in the spirit of the last few weeks, I'm going to give myself a maximum of 3 takes. That's what I'm going to do. Again, time is a factor, and also the fact that sometimes I find, I don't know whether you're the same, but if I just say I'm just going to keep going until I'm happy, I'll be sat here until tomorrow, or it could be. Whereas if I say, this is how much time I've got, this has got to be done in this amount of time, somehow, miraculously, it gets done. I don't really know. Particularly if there's absolutely no option, like it has to be finished, It's not like a thing that I've imposed myself, which I can go back on. Like if I've got to be somewhere and I've got to get this done before I go, it gets done, So with that in mind, I'm going to give myself 3 takes on this tune. This is written by a saxophone player called Frank Wolf. It's a tune called Captain Ferber. But I first encountered it being played by the guitarist Borelli Legren. Frank Wolf is the saxophone player in Borelli's band, and it's been a pleasure of mine to see him just grow and grow and grow as a player. When I first saw him play with Borelli, probably a couple of decades ago, probably now, I think, wow, time flies. And he sounded great, he sounded great then, but he sounds incredible now. It's like, it's really helped that consistent playing, and I'm sure he's learned a lot from Borelli as Borelli's learned from him, but there's been a real kind of noticeable growth in his playing, in my humble opinion. As I say, he always sounded great, but now he sounds like truly awesome. And he wrote this song, so there's a couple of versions of it. Borelli's recorded it a few times, and there's loads of YouTube clips as well, so I'd urge you to check that out. But I hope you enjoy my rendition of Frank Wolf's tune called Captain Ferber. So I'm going to get stuck into my 3 takes now, and I'll see you on the other side, and then we're going to look at some melodic minor, Mixolydian melodic minor, symmetrical diminished connections, and then a couple of Django licks, and then I'll sign off, and I'll see you next time. enjoyed that piece. It's a really great tune to play over. It's a lot of fun. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the approaches that I used, and it answers a question I had from Tony dealing with managing symmetrical scales, working into these symmetrical scales. So because this is essentially just the same chord in 3 different places, you have a C7 and then going to an F7, going back to a C7 to a G7, like a long form blues, and you stick around on those chords for quite some time, we can really explore tension and resolution against each event. And one of the ways to do this, of which there are many of course, and we've spoken about several of these over the weeks, this is a particular approach that I used in this piece, which will allow you to work your way into various degrees of dissonance against one chord. So of course, as we're playing over C7 here, we use this as our teaching device, if you like, but you can apply the same concept in many different locations. So with this in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a loop just of the C7. So that's our C7 groove, and it's not going to move to the F and it's not going to move to the G, not at the moment anyway. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this, right? So again, C7, I'm hoping at this stage you'd be familiar with the options of C Mixolydian, so Mixolydian being dominant scale, so I get a major scale with a flat 7, B flat, not a B natural. Okay, and then I also there included the minor third in a bluesy way, very often resolving to the major third. There's a few little chromatic notes there, blue notes and whatever. So what we've got is, now within this we've got all the arpeggios like C7, E minor 7 flat 5, we've got a G minor 7. In fact, you can see this from this G minor perspective, all these jazz lines. Seen from the perspective of G minor, the Pat Martino minorizing concept. So G minor, B flat, major 7, B flat major 7 is an option against this, as is D minor and F major. That's every arpeggio there, I think. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was them all. Yeah, so or you can do them from each degree. C7, come down D minor, E half diminished, come down F major, major 7 of course, G minor, down A minor, up B flat major, down C7. That's a great sound, but it's not really tense. There's not really much in the way of tension. I guess maybe that, which is usually resolved with a little bend. And so on. The familiar sounds that we all use, you know. Jacko and all those guys. Okay, so we can introduce a little bit of tension into proceedings here by adding the sharp 4. We add the raised 4 like you would do with Lydian, but of course it's got a flat 7, so we give it the name Lydian dominant or Lydian flat 7. So that sounds like this. In fact, I think I played a line earlier on. I went in this section that had the sharp 4 in it. They're also kind of mixed now for me. I see them all as being the same thing really, but they're just like different subsets within one sound, if that makes sense. But if we see it as an independent entity, we have C major with a flat 7 but with a raised 4. So what we have there is all the arpeggios now coming from that scale. They also resemble the same arpeggios you get from a G melodic minor scale. So maybe a more like comfortable perspective to see that same thing is, instead of seeing it as C mixer Lydian, going to C Lydian flat 7. You could see it as being G Dorian, go to G melodic minor. And both are valuable and valid. I have a preference for seeing it this way, from the C, because then it allows me to see like C blues as well as an option. Whereas if I'm seeing it from the perspective of G, I'm not going to see that C. But I can see both at the same time, that's fine. What you can see as the common denominator here between the two is a G minus 6 arpeggio, or G minus 6 pentatonic, that doesn't have either of the fourth in there, so that could go either way. Whereas if you play G minus 7, that gives us the perfect fourth. Whereas if I play G minor major 7, there's our raised 4. So you've also got C dominant pentatonic and also a D. So in melodic minor you have 2 minus 6 arpeggios or 2 minus 6 pentatonics next to one another. So you could have G minus 6, A minus 6, oh look at that, I play quite a bit. C, D, C, D, D. So that's D, C, just kind of that. Okay, so that's our second thing. So we go from mixed Lydian, we go from there into melodic minor or Lydian flat 7, if you think of that. Okay, so now, let me just pause there. I've got 2 thoughts to add to this. So this might be an appropriate point to pause. One of the things about learning these scales that I think is really paramount really to you to developing your own style is that you approach them with the same tools. Sometimes I hear in players, when they use a certain scale or a certain approach, they start to play things that they only do in that approach. Like if you hear someone playing harmonic minor scale, and they start playing a lot of Ingve licks that they wouldn't play if they were playing the major scale. It's like as if the scale's playing them rather than they're playing the scale, if that makes sense. So just because you've learned a scale that you might associate with whatever particular player even or style of music, whatever devices that you've learned to do in one scale, you should do in every scale. So say for example, I've got this as a pattern that I draw from. When I'm playing the thirds, but I'm playing the lowest notes, then the third, and then so the lowest note, the third, and then back to the lowest note again. So it's a 3-note pattern, but I'm playing it sometimes in groups of 4. So it's rhythmically displaced. It's playing a 3-note phrase over a rate of 4. which is something we can discuss in great depth at some point. If you're interested in this kind of thing, then just drop me a line and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So if I've learned that in this scale, and I'm also aware that I could use this scale, I've got an obligation to learn it. Same kind of patterns, just when I'm playing half whole or in this case Lydian flat 7. So I shouldn't sound like a different guitar player because I'm playing Lydian flat 7. I should still sound like me. I just happen to be playing that sound. So with this in mind, right, one of the beauties of this particular scale, and anything to do with the melodic minor scale, right, so I'm going to talk about this as it relates to G melodic minor, just because you're probably more familiar with that than you are with Lydian flat 7, I would think. Right. So there's a particular chain of events that happens in melodic minor scale. There's a similarity to two scales that you probably also already know, but maybe you might not have spotted this connection. And that is, if I were to go from, say I play G melodic minor, but like the jazz melodic minor that goes up and down the same direction. So it's like a Dorian mode with a major 7 or a major scale with a flat 3, however you want to think of it. Okay, if I go from this degree, from the B flat, and I go all the way up to the F sharp, so it's from the 3rd to the 7th, what I can see there is a series of whole tone steps. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes from the whole tone scale. Okay. So this period, so if I do it in Lydian flat 7 and this area here we've been dwelling in, of course they're all the same thing, it's just a question of perspective, right? So now see it from the perspective of Lydian flat 7, just so that you've got both approaches. From the flat 7, okay, all the way up to that raised 4, you've got flat 7, root, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So against this chord, if I do this, how do I know which scale that is? How do I know if that's Lydian flat 7 or whole tone scale? If I just play this, then the answer is it could be either, because they're in common, they're exactly the same. So it's only when I play this, those two notes, that gives the game away that it's Lydian flat 7. If I play the perfect 5th and the 6th, then I know it's Lydian flat 7. So if I switch those and I take the 5 and the 6 and I put a raised 5 in its place, then I have a complete 100% accurate whole tone scale. Everything else is in common. So that much of Lydian flat 7. That's Lydian flat 7. Now it's whole tone scale. So I could move from Mixolydian to Lydian flat 7. To whole tone. It's my lick of the week, actually, that one as well. Keep that like that. I'll show you that lick in a second. So that means that over this one chord I can go blues, Mixolydian, Lydian flat 7, whole tone, out again. that's one chain of similarity. So let's go back to melodic minor again. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is G melodic minor. So now if I play from the E, and I just move up the E, from the melodic minor from E, so from G root, 6, major 7, root, 2nd, minor 3rd, 4th. So those 6 notes resemble the diminished scale. So of the 7 notes that are in the scale, 6 of them are identical. So when I play this note, that I know that it's melodic minor. That's the only note that gives the game away that it's melodic minor. Okay, this is back in that same scale again. It's diminished again. So there's only one note in melodic minor scale that doesn't follow the diminished scale pattern. Okay, so all I have to do with this is take this note out, take the D out, the perfect fifth of G, and replace it with the flat 5 and the raised 5, and then that gives me this. Pure, symmetrical, diminished scale. So we can see it here, a bit like, it's almost like diminished is like melodic minor blues in a way, because the melodic minor scale goes like so, whereas if you put a bluesy note in, and you hear those guys who play with Miles doing that a lot, you know, Robin Ford, Schofield, you know, they have this thing about diminished scale. That period of Miles is playing where he used a lot of diminished scale, and all the players that came from it, like coincidentally or not, all became particularly proficient with diminished scale, you know, because I think it was a sound that Miles was into. Larry Coryell and all those guys, I think, are accredited as being one of the first guitar players to really exploit this diminished, symmetrical diminished sound. Okay, so we've got over a minor chord. So you might go G minor, G minor 6, G minor blues, and you play the diminished scale against it. So if I see that exact same pattern now from the perspective of C, what I get is this. Okay, so I get C, Mixolydian, C, Lydian, flat 7. So can you see this pattern? So the only note, I guess, the C that's given us, that's disrupting this pattern of half step and whole step is the D note. So that isn't half whole. But if I get rid of this D, the same D that I got rid of here, and I put a D flat and a D sharp in its place, check out what we get then. If I do that, if I go G, and then I put a D flat, and a D sharp, and then continue where I was, the way I was, I have half tone, whole tone. And so in this case, from the G, it's the whole step, half step, but from C, it's half step, whole step. So when I'm playing these notes in Lydian flat 7, so from the 3rd, the only thing that gives the game away that I'm playing within the melodic minor modes is the D. So again, if I replace that D with a D flat and a D sharp, I've got all this kind of fun things that you can play with the diminished scale, you know. Or going back to my first point, right? If I've learnt this, if I've got those kind of ideas down, I should be able to go. Exact same pattern. It should sound like me playing the diminished scale, not like, oh, now I'm playing diminished scale, so I'll play a whole bunch of John Scofield licks, which is what sometimes happens. It also happens, funnily enough, with tunes. It's something I've noticed. Fusion players are particularly bad at doing this. and I used to do it too until the penny dropped, and I thought I'm not going to do that anymore because it's corny. Would be if I for whatever reason, you know, found myself playing a piece. So this piece is written by it's played by Borelli-Legrand. It's written by Frank Wolf, but I don't feel like there's any inclination when I'm playing this song to like emulate Borelli-Legrand. No more so than I feel the need to emulate Borelli-Legrand when I'm playing anything, you know, because he's amazing, you know. So I'd love to sound as good as him. I wouldn't necessarily want to sound like him, but you know, but we can dream, yeah. We can, you know, one can dream. But I don't feel, you take my point, I don't feel the inclination, because it's a tune that I associate with hearing it being played by Borelli, to like include a load of Borelliisms, any more so than if I were to be playing a John Scofield tune, and we're going to look at the harmony of a Scofield tune next week, thanks to a question from James. I wouldn't feel the obligation to, just because it's a Scofield piece, to pick by the bridge pickup and stick a chorus pedal on and play a load of Scofield cliches. But sometimes players do that, you know, because it's played, you know, this song's written by Alan Holdsworth. Okay, I'm going to include a load of Holdsworthisms, you know, again, you know, I can dream, you know. Although that is something that I've got to do in the next week. There's a Holdsworth tribute album that I've been asked to play on. But I'd be at great pains in my own performance, which is yet to be recorded, to not like try and include a few sort of second-hand Holdsworth licks in there. Any more than, of course, I'm going to play the piece. But when it comes to the improvising section, do your own thing, you know. You want to try and sound like yourself, I guess. And part of that comes from whatever tools you've got. So I've talked about this tool, the 1-3-1-2. So 1-3-1-2-4-2 tool, you know, root third, root second. So I should not be able to do that. In fact, I'll put it through Mixolydian. Lydian flat 7. Hold tone. Half hold. And back out again via blues. So let's just recap what we've got here. We've got C Mixolydian. Raise the 4. Lydian flat 7. Okay, replace the 5 and 6 with the sharp 5. Whole tone. Okay, back to Lydian flat 7. So there we replace the 2 with a flat 2. Flat 2 and a raised 2. That's that same kind of pattern with bigger intervals. Okay, so the patterns are kind of, that's up to you then, isn't it? The patterns could be whatever patterns you play. Okay, so I'm hoping that that's making sense. I'm just going to show you a few little cool things as to how these two symmetrical scales, the half whole and the whole tone scale, can be used to play over the other chords. So if I play this for C7, so that's like half whole, gives me C13 flat 9 against that chord. If I move down a semitone, that gives me the half whole that you would play. Get over F. So to go from C, so F. It's as simple as that, you know. So if I've got some phrase going F. So whatever I play here, so say I'm going over F, I can go. Move it just down a semitone, C, F. And of course this works in minor thirds, yeah? Then I go to C, and guess what happens for G? Up a semitone. So if I move this pattern up a semitone, it becomes G half whole because it's symmetrical. So all I have to remember, if I find myself in this half tone, whole tone C of potential, G, there's G7. So C7, F7 is a semitone below, C7, G7 is a semitone higher. Or in fact, if I found myself going from F7 to G7, then I'd just go from F7, a semitone below, G7, another semitone below, because it repeats in minor thirds. Okay, now the whole tone scale is even easier, right? So if I go here's C whole tone, or C sharp 5, or sometimes you can play with a sharp 5, or you can play like 13 with a raised 4, because it's got both a raised 4 and a raised 5. Okay, so I can go C7 whole tone, and my lick of the month or whatever it is. Okay, I seem to be using that a lot. That kind of idea. Okay, all I have to do to make that into F7 is move it either up or down by a semitone. There's C7. There's F7. And there's C7. And here's G7. Because G7 and F7 are the same thing, yeah? G whole tone and F whole tone are the same thing. So all I have to do when going from C to F, if you find yourself in this whole tone type of idea, is just move whatever you're doing up or down by a semitone. So there's C7. Semitone. Up or down by a semitone. You might want to listen to the amazing guitarist Oz Noy if you want to hear a modern player who's got a real grip of whole tone scale. It's kind of that and displaced semiquavers are sort of like his shtick, if you like. They're like his thing. I mean, amongst a whole bunch of other stuff, he's amazing. You know, he's absolutely incredible. So this is quite long. It's quite a long section, but I'm hoping it makes sense to you as to what the logic is behind a lot of those ideas that you just heard. Thanks for the question, Tony. We keep coming back to this, mate, because it's one of those things. You know, it seems to be a common sort of perennial guitar question or improvising question is how do you get tension in your playing but without it sounding like just a load of wrong stuff, you know. So hopefully with this you can sort of introduce degrees of dissonance, but it still will sound like you and still sounds like it's connected to the chords, and you can find ways to work your way in and out and make sense of those scales that if you just drop in on them they can sound a bit weird, you know, because it's sort of like you've got to ease your way into those sounds, I think. And they will sound much more natural and they'll sound much more like correct, for want of a better word. So I'm hoping that that's opened the door to some new sounds and that you enjoyed that piece. So that's going to be the first big section for today. Here's number 7 from our collection of 10 of Django licks. Yeah, here we go. So it's quite unusual, this one, in jazz, in the fact that it's hugely pentatonic. A lot of players think that pentatonic scale doesn't really have a place in jazz, and I would really beg to differ, as this Django lick typifies. So the one thing I would say though is you often need to learn these things from the perspective of major. So slowly what we have is, this is a C major pentatonic. So that's the root, whereas I think blues rockers amongst us would prefer to see this is the root. From A minor, Django here, I'm pretty certain is seeing this as a C major. And then what we're imagining now is like a D7 or D9, and he plays a D9 arpeggio. So it's a D9 arpeggio. Like a D7, yeah, so we've got C. D7, now we can perceive this in a number of ways. I'd like to think of this as like a 2-chord minor 7 flat 5, or so that's as if we've gone C, D7, D minor 7 flat 5, to a G7, which he just played, like a G13. So that. So we've gone from this arpeggio now. Another way of seeing this is as an F minor, so as if we're going C, F minor 6 to G7, so that kind of. So D7. Lick number 7 from 10. Here's a super classic Django lick for number 8. I'll play it slowly first. A little bit faster. So that's obviously using diminished seventh, and there's a particular picking motion here that I want to talk about. That's this sort of Django cliche in a way, which uses one upstroke and one downstroke across 3 strings. Although in this instance it's displaced, so we start with the downstrokes, if that makes sense. So we've got, and that's one down pick using that sort of follow through rest stroke picking, and then an up. So down, 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 up. And then we move to the next chord. So actually we stay where we are. So we're moving on the index and the E string, sorry, not on the index finger, on the ring finger. So that's a motion you should practice. I mean, you notice there, kind of pumping with the first and second fingers, and that's what gives it the clarity, so it doesn't sound like with the notes ringing in it. That kind of idea. So what's happening here? All these different variations and permutations. So this particular one, the third finger stays on the string. Not at the start, it lands on the string now and doesn't move off that string, it just slides, whereas these 2 fingers, the first and second, are removed. And that's how you get the clarity. It ties in with Django's hand, doesn't it? And the fact that that note, this high note, must have been one of the fingers that was withdrawn into his hand from the fire. So the only fingers that he could really sort of move are those index and second fingers. This one was just planted there and the hand moved. So it makes sense that that stays where it is whilst these fingers are moving on and off to create that sort of sense of separation. Now, harmonically, there's some interesting stuff happening here because he's playing diminished against the dominant chord. And then against D minor 6 in this instance. He's playing D diminished 7th. So that's D minor 6. That's like D minor flat 5. You know, as is that, D minor 6 flat 5 if you want to call it. So he's treating this as like D minor blues with a flat 5 by playing diminished against it. It's similar to what we touched upon a moment ago when we looked at melodic minor, and the same thing happens over the next 2 chords. So we've got A7, diminished again, then he takes a liberty here, resolves at that point. So there is that thing about intent. If you play something with intention, it's going to work, harmonically speaking. And because it's obviously such a strong rhythmic phrase, the audience or the listener buys into the fact that there are some notes there that are maybe at odds with the harmony. But it's definitely done with intention. It's not a mistake by any stretch of the imagination. It's such a beautiful sound. These things definitely work. And if it works for Django, it's going to work for you too. So it's a good idea to sort of pay attention to when players, sort of, shall we say, break the rules, because then it means that it gives us a pass. It allows us to do the same kind of thing in our own improvisation because they've set a precedent, you know. So I hope you enjoy those 2 phrases. I'll finish this off next week. Apologies for not doing the remaining 4, but I'm kind of I really want to keep these going. So when things get busy, what I'll do is I'll just cut things down, you know, as I said in the introduction. But so I hope you enjoyed those Django phrases. I hope you enjoyed the Borelli-Legrand piece. I'll sign off now. So that I can go and get my recording done, and I'm not a bad boy. I'm missing deadlines and so on. I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday. Lockdown is not affecting you too greatly. As always, I hope you're practicing furiously, making great music, making great improvements in your playing. Please share your thoughts with me if there's anything you'd like me to cover. I'll definitely be back next week. I'll have a bit more time next week, so it'll be a longer session. I'll be able to cover more ground. Likes and shares are greatly appreciated, and they really help to spread the word. So if you know anyone that would that you think might like these sessions, please let them know about them. Please let me know if you're enjoying them. Some comments would be great. Thanks for the wonderful messages I get. I get quite a few private messages via Messenger or via my website. They're all greatly appreciated, and I take all those comments on board. So I hope you're enjoying these sessions. I will keep them coming. Take care of yourself. Have a great rest of Sunday, or if you're watching this in the week, have a great week. And I shall see you next week.